Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're taking a look at this pin nailer from Arrow fastener maybe, and the tricks that it has up its sleeve. So I picked this up recently for what I thought was a relatively pretty good deal. Found it on Amazon. I couldn't find it locally around where I live. And so I picked this up because this has a really, really interesting trick up its sleeve. So let's get out of the box and see what you get. So there's nothing really special about what's on the box here. But what is very notable is the chart on the back goes all the way down to 10 millimeters or 3/8 of an inch. And that to me was a pretty big deal because as far as I'm aware, this is the only nailer that at least advertises going all the way down to 10 millimeters. So let's open the box and see what we get. We have a manual. We have some oil. And a couple Allen wrenches, and the tool. Take the tool out of the bag. First thing that I see with this tool, it's got a dust port cover. I love dust port covers in my pneumatic tools. If you need a replacement one of these, you can pick up one from a Tabo HPT. I'll put a little card up in the corner with more info about that. But I love to have things like that on my tools. And so this uses the dual trigger release. Pull up one as a safety to release the other. And because if the top trigger is down, you can't actually depress the actual firing trigger, which is the one that's lower and farther forward. And so then on here, it looks like we have to manually set our fastener size, which I think is kind of interesting that we've got to set it here as a setting here. We've got some reminders here on the side. And then let's open up the end. This pulls off here. So this is a nice metal build. And we have some springs in the tray there. And you can see where our pins would line up right in here in the middle. And then up on top, we've got an adjustable exhaust port that we can spin around so that exhaust is not coming right back into our face. And so overall, just based on fit and finish, I would say it's not nearly as nice as my trusty pin nailer, which has been my Porter cable one. That this to me is basically the gold standard when it comes to pin nailers, at least pneumatic pin nailers. But this does not go all the way down to 10 millimeter pins, and so I wanted something that would go smaller. And it's interesting looking at the sticker on the side here. This is showing 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter, but the box showed us going down to 10 millimeters. So let's hold this up to the camera, and hopefully you can see that if this is focusing right. And so then I picked up the corresponding set of 23 gauge, 3/8 inch, 10 millimeter pin nails to go along with this. We'll take one of these, open up the tool, and we'll find the arrow on the side of the nails. Hopefully you can see that. Looks kind of like a Christmas tree. Have that arrow pointing down as we slide our pins right into our tray there. And then we'll go ahead and close this up. I'll say on the end where this closes up, I have to retract manually the little locking lever there. It'd be nice if I could just push that closed. And so one of the things that I don't see that's very obviously printed on here that would be good to know is a maximum air pressure. That to me would be a great item for a very prominent sticker. All the Porter cable ones, just for reference, have maximum operating pressure stickers very clearly written on the side, which is very useful. We do have a warning sticker on the front of the tool here, but this says nothing about the operating pressure. And so now with these 3/8 or 10 millimeter, we'll go ahead and put this all the way down in the lowest setting of 13 millimeter or 1/2 inch. I'm a little confused as to why this doesn't actually show the 10 millimeter or 3/8, only a 1/2 inch. So hopefully it'll be okay. A little confusing. Now let's see if this is any better on the manual. This is interesting here. Now this is saying from 1/2 inch to 1 inch, 12 millimeter to 25 millimeter headless pin nails is what it's designed for, even though the box very clearly showed 10 millimeter. So a little confusing on this tool for how this is being advertised and marketed, because I really need something small, basically as a glue clamp, for lack of a better phrase, that I can hide in plain sight, which is why I picked this up as basically as our one-trick pony for these 10 millimeter pin nails. And so if it doesn't actually do that, then I'm going to be a little concerned. And then in this case here, we're looking at dry air up to 100 psi and some diagrams. And so that's about it. So unfortunately, the manual is not helping me resolve the issue of, well, how deep is this supposed to go? We got the air tool oil here. I'm a big fan of Marvel Mystery Oil for air tool oil rather than this stuff. I don't know actually what it is that came with it. Now, what I will say that's pretty nifty is if you look at this bottle, you can see this lid that looks like it's cut off. And if I turn this sideways, it's not really going to spill. That this is designed for me to turn this around like this, put it down, and then now I can squirt in some air tool oil into the back of the tool. Very clever how they did it, so that the length of the, we'll call it the straw end of the air tool oil goes all the way to the bottom to keep it from leaking out. Very clever in how they packaged it. We got a couple extra screws and a couple extra Allen wrenches here in case we have to clear a jam. So on the front end here, there is not a toolless jam clear. To be fair, the Porter cable on the right does not have a toolless jam for these pin nails either. And so now I want to see if this will perform okay with these 10 millimeter pins, or 3/8 inch, however you want to measure them. So let me set this up here and then we'll do a little quick test. All right, I've got a test piece here. I've got a piece of basically 1/8 inch oak plywood into oak, and I've got my compressor set at about 98 psi, so I should be within range. And this has the 10 millimeter pin nails, so let me drop one in here, lifting up on that top trigger and then releasing the bottom one. And it indeed sank it. Let's try that again and check our firing pin issues. And so what I'm seeing here is it's firing fine. There's definitely leaving a little indentation from the firing pin, so I might need to dial back the pressure. All right, now we're about 78 psi, and we'll see if that makes any difference. At least to me, that's looking a little bit better compared to the other ones that were closer to 100. I think that firing pin coming down was maybe set a little too high, causing a slightly bigger indentation than with this set at about 78. And that seems to be about the sweet spot. That's just slightly below the surface on it. And I think that's going to look pretty good. Let me try one more test here. All right, here's a scrap piece of white trim. And we'll see if we can put one of these 10 millimeters in here and see how well or how much it damages the finish. And so it's definitely leaving a hole you need to be able to come back and touch up in something that needs to be finished. In my case, I think this will be perfect because I'm going to be nailing from behind and it'll hide just well because of that 10 millimeter depth being short enough, but clearly something to be aware of with that firing pin driving down. Maybe I could back off the pressure on this just a little bit further to refine it, but it looks like those 10 millimeter 3/8 nails do look fine. Just for comparison, here's my Porter cable, and these are admittedly longer ones. I've got 1-inch pins in here, also 23 gauge, so you can see how the holes compare. So with the Porter cable, these two are the holes. you can only really just see the metal pin surface there, whereas there's an indentation from the firing pin here driving in on this Arrow, so it's definitely more air pressure sensitive. Let me try backing off the air pressure just one more time for this Arrow to see if that will still help make that any better, because right now that Porter cable is definitely still coming out ahead. So now with the air compressor back down to about 60 psi, we'll see if that makes this any better. I'm going to go with no. Let's try to dial that back even farther. All right, so now I've backed this all the way down to 30 psi, which should be stupidly low. And it won't fire at 30, so we're going to have to turn it up just a little bit higher. Now I've got it up to about 41 or 42. Still fires, but it's certainly leaving a larger hole than what my Porter cable does. The Porter cable indeed has a much, much tighter finish with this white board. Now, due to my disappointment how large these holes continue to be despite all the air pressure adjustments with that Arrow nailer, I'm going to try those 10mm nails in my Porter cable nailer, the one that I can think is probably the gold standard. They sit down here really far down in the tray. All the other sizes have these nice little grooves that fit with them. So I'm not really sure what the result of this is going to be. I'm going to put the air hose on. This is set to 60 psi. And so it looks like this is sinking them just slightly flush. There appears to be a little bit of red on the top, which I think might be from the actual nail sets themselves rather than from the tool, which would be, in all fairness to the one shot with the Arrow, might be able to rub off a little bit here, but it looks like these are working just fine with the Porter cable. So it looks like you might have some options for which size you want to use. I'm not sure if this is recommended for the Porter cable, but at least as a proof of concept, it does work. And this is probably fine for a few shots. I don't know if I'd want to go all day on the Porter cable with those 10mm nails. From that 60 psi it's off, you might need to back that down just a little bit farther at 10mm or 3/8 to get that to work. But I think that's definitely a viable alternative. And so that leaves me wondering a little bit more about the Arrow. And unless you're using the really short nails, it's hard for me to recommend. I just don't like how on the Arrow the drive shaft just is leaving marks on the wood. I would prefer it to be non-marring, and I don't consider it to be non-marring based on the dents left in the wood, especially this pre-finished board here. Obviously, I can tack it back over, but what I want is a nice flush pin nail at just a dip of a pin, if that, will hide it, or it can be sent flush below the surface very cleanly, and I don't see that working with this Arrow nailer. So that's just where we're at on it. So after further testing with this Arrow nailer, what I've come to discover is that I think the source of my oversized holes on this test piece here is not necessarily the result of the tool not working, but it sort of is. So let me explain. On the Porter cable at the very end, you'll see there's this gray plastic tip here. It helps to basically prevent any mars from the tip. And because of how much wider it makes it, helps to avoid me pressing the nose of the nailer too hard and pressing it into some of these softer woods, like this pre-finished pine piece of trim here I'm using as an example. Whereas this Arrow, for example, does not have a nose piece and has a small sharpness to the nose that pressing it a little bit. Let me try this here with no air attached to the tool, obviously. And if I press too hard, you can see where I'm able to mar the surface. I'm not sure how well this is going to come through on the camera, right there by my thumb, but I can definitely mar the surface with that, whereas with my Porter cable with this little gray non-marring tip here, I'm just not able to do it nearly as bad. And so it comes down really to the tip. And so it looks like the key with this Arrow, because once I figured it out, it starts to be able to hide some of these nails really, really well, and I was very pleased with it. But it requires just a very, very soft touch with these 10mm ones to basically set the tool on it and pull the trigger, and then it's fine. And the other piece is these 10mm nails have a little bit of a red sheathing on it, so if you see some of that, you've got to just kind of rub it off with your thumb, and then it'll come off. So let me show you a couple more test shots with the tool. This is at 60 psi. All right, so once I rub the little red piece away, this tucks away rather nicely. Let me try one more. Okay, you can clearly see that one. That one's actually just a little proud. Maybe I should have a little more pressure on it. Let me try one more. That's nice and flush. Still a little more visible than I would prefer, but far better than what I was getting before. So I think your mileage is going to vary based on how much of a gentle ginger touch you have with this Arrow nailer. It's not nearly as ideal. Clearly what they're missing is the little nose protector that would lead to more consistent results that other tools have. Maybe I'll see if I can pick up something like that to put on the end of here. So I'm a little disappointed in this tool. It definitely shows they've cut a few corners on it, but the fact that it's designed for the 10mm, where in theory it's supposed to be designed for these 10mm pin nails, makes me excited about the tool, a little disappointed, full of a bunch of mixed feelings about this today. So now that we've seen in the manual and the tool, neither of which references this actually taking these 3/8 or 10mm pin nails, which I find to be a little bit odd. I would have expected it to actually make reference to these, even though, because the box does, but the tool in the manual should be consistent. So now the next thing I want to check is, are these really 3/8 of an inch or 10mm? So let me take a strip of these nails out. And we'll put these into the dial calipers and measure how long these are. And this is checking in at 0.388. So just slightly more than 3/8 of an inch, because 3/8 should be 0.375 inches. But this is coming in at 0.388 inches. So it's pretty darn close to that 3/8 of an inch that they advertise. It's not 3/8, but 0.388 inches. That's pretty close that at least I think it's a pass. So after a lot more testing off camera with this Arrow pin nailer, I have to say I'm definitely disappointed with the results. And I think a lot of it comes down to, first of all, in order for me to minimize the marring damage of the tip or the toe due to the lack of a plastic protective shoe, there's also this heel back here that if you set it down on the heel and then just tap the toe and then shoot, can minimize the pressure on it. But even still, the results from my experience so far have been inconsistent at best. And frequently, this 7-inch distance from toe to heel on this tool, I don't always have. I just want to reach in and nail something without actually having to touch the heel of the tool down. I'm able to get consistent results with my trusty Porter cable, which does come with the tip. They're a non-marring tip, and they even see fit, because I think it's so important, they give you a second non-marring tip with the tool, because it's so important to not mar the surface to get consistent results. Pretty straightforward, and the fact that there is no heel on this tool, I just set it down, press the trigger, and pull, and I'm getting consistent results with these 10mm almost 3/8 inch pin nails. So do I think these pin nails are worth it? Yeah, this is the only source I'm aware of for 10mm 23 gauge pin nails. And then continuing to test it in the Porter cable, the only situation I've had anything close to a jam is if I've got two sticks together. They don't seem to push together. If you have one stick that's getting a little short and then backing up another stick behind it, that's a little weird. Just run the stick down. You'll be fine. Then put in a new one, and you have to discard a little bit as waste. Is it a little annoying? Yes, but the results are far more consistent with the Porter cable than with the Arrow with these 10mm pin nails. Now, maybe it's because this tool's a little wonky because it doesn't even say 3/8 of an inch here on this depth setting on the tool. A little weird, even though the box says that it's supposed to have it. So I'm not really sure what's going on with this Arrow nailer. So ultimately, at the end of the day, can I recommend this Arrow 23 gauge pin nailer? I don't think so. Like, I think you're better off spending a few extra dollars on this Porter cable or a few other ones that are very similar to it with a non-marring tip and otherwise. And then if you need this 3/8 nail, go ahead and get these Arrows. They seem to work fine once you take your finger and rub a little bit of a red glue off the top, and you're back in business. A little bit of precariousness of making sure when one stick's about to run out and catching that. So just a little bit of attention to looking for whatever your specific tool has for being able to alert you that you're running out of nails. On the Porter cable here, there's a little window you can peer into. And if that's running low, then it's time for me to basically waste out the remaining sleeve of 23 gauge pin nails and put in a new one. Not a big deal, a little bit of waste. These are specialty fasteners in the first place. And so I'm left feeling a little disappointed today. This Arrow definitely did not live up to the expectations I had for it. And ultimately, I think I got what I paid for it. You know, I think I want to pay just a little bit under $60 for it. Honestly, my opinion is I think that might even still be a little bit high for the results that we're getting. Maybe not. If you've got any other thoughts, questions, or comments about this, go ahead and put it down below. Would love to hear about it. If you've had any good experiences with these, bad experiences, or somewhere in between, please share it. I'd love to know more about it, and so would everybody else. And if you like other videos like this, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Give it a thumbs up. Check back here often for new videos. I'll see you back here soon. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day. Bye.